You are live.
Welcome to your awakening.
Please stay at the circle while your broadcast is adjusted. Oh, the lag. Yeah, you get the point. I'll leave it at that image. That'll do. Welcome to your awakening. Please stay calm as your reality is adjusted. Welcome again, folks. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back once again. Greetings, salutations, good evening, hello, how are you, etc. Oh, and Epstein did not kill himself. There may be a theme to tonight's show. Tonight's show will be brought to you by the lack of killing oneself that Epstein performed. It's got that open. And I'm gibbering away. Have I actually got myself unmuted? Yes. Right, okay. We'll get all professional in a minute and sort things out. Looks like the YouTube's going okay. Hopefully people say in the chat room if there's something amiss there, such as the audio not working or whatever. And quick, give me back the other screen. And I think we can stop the screen share now. Right, okay. Yes, welcome back. Another episode of Sol Excalibre on this moon day, evening, nighttime, depends where you are in the world, because, you know, it's transitory. Just gone the 8 p.m., 2000 hours of the 4th of the 11th, 2019. And weirdly, synchronistically, this is episode 11. On the season 3, so 3/11, and it's the day after 3/11. And for all those people who might happen to be living in Seattle that hear this, hello, I'm glad something major didn't occur to you yesterday. I haven't had the chance yet to catch up with Jeff's video that he did yesterday. I noticed he did a video talking about that. What should I call it? Suggestion, theory, question about something happening in Seattle on the 3rd of the 11th that was supposed to happen. So I'm not sure, well, I don't know what he would have said about it, what other information he might have, but I get the impression that maybe it could have been a deliberate viral marketing scam, and that there was nothing at all to the whole question in the first place. It was just a music industry manipulation of this modern internet social media age, where they saturate a bunch of ideas with some imagery and some memes and some paid marketeers who go out into the virtual space and seed and fuel some of those ideas and talking points. And before you know it, everybody's starting, well, is something going to happen in Seattle on 3/11? What's going on? Or is it just a bunch of K-pop? I think they were K-pop, weren't they? Pop stars with their silly pop music, doing silly hand signals in their videos and whatever. Now that it was a little bit late, because as per usual, we was chattering before we started, and we just happened to be talking about this internet gaming, or the gaming age that we're now in, because it's not just on this kind of internet. You know, most of the game consoles absolutely rely on the internet infrastructure now. That's a big part of how they've set it up, so that everything is being merged into the cloud, and that kind of media content will become all part of that cloud-based system, a virtualized, digitized, external system that you don't have or own or can put your hands on. Obviously, it's in the digital space, but you don't even have the disk that has the software on it. Everything exists only in the virtual space in the cloud. But even things such as the music industry, the media in general, whether it be films, cinema films, movies, or TV shows, it's all going to be transitioning into that cloud-based infrastructure. And as the gaming software gets better and better, which it has done year by year, and it's getting into this kind of level now, it's verging into this new environment where the gaming style or the way of utilizing software, computer software, to create an interactive environment, because gaming is not so much gaming per se as it used to be many years ago, where you would, for example, play a game where you're the protagonist, you're the hero, and you have to rescue the princess from the tower, and you do so in a side-scrolling game where you do beat-em-up moves to beat the enemy that come at you, and that's, you know, level-based progression through a game world. Games now are very, very broad in what they present as being a game. Really, I feel it comes down to that principle of interactability. Can you interact with it in some fashion? Does the environment give you choices to make, or things that you can interact with in some manner that it affects what is occurring in the environment, even if it's things like swinging a digital sword at flying fruit and the fruit splits into or little bits or whatever. You know, that fruit game, you know, a lot of people were obsessed over a few years ago on their smartphones. But yeah, that kind of stuff is, or the gaming stuff is much more ambiguous now. There's many things that can be called gaming software or gaming culture, but it's more about really just the interaction. And certainly over the past decade plus, nearly 2 decades really, they have very much concentrated on moving towards fully immersive, fully interactable environments. So even if your thing is playing World War II shoot 'em up games, the game world that you participate in will be much more interactive, or it'll be much more immersive in a multiplayer sense. So you will be connecting with hundreds of other people all around the world, and you're all taking part within the one game environment. That is going to start merging into areas like music and TV production and movie production. So movies are going to become more like games, and games are going to become more like movies. Really, that is already happening. What we're starting to see now is the direct merger of the two, where many people would rather spend money purchasing a game that they know they'll get many hours of enjoyment out of, rather than paying to watch a cinema movie production, because that movie production will only be a few hours. If you're really into the story, you might get into some of the merchandising and maybe join a club about your favorite movie or the author or whatever. There's a certain element of long-term interactability, but it's nothing like what you would get out of a game version of the same storyline. The game could give you many multiple hours of interaction in that story environment. But yeah, are we starting to see that kind of merger? I think we are, and in a way, some of the stuff I want to mention tonight, in a way, sort of links into some of that. I don't know how long I will ramble and rant tonight. Oh, and I forgot to mention as well, Epstein didn't kill himself. I just thought I'd better mention that now, you know, public service announcement kind of thing. That's going to be a terrible theme all through tonight. I apologize in advance, but you know, I thought it made me laugh when I saw the clip of it. I thought spot on. Whether you believe it or not, or you think it's all bunkum or what, it's just the fact that he got that in on mainstream news. That was fucking brilliant. Yes, some other things to mention. Frack off. This is sort of been bandied around in the UK media as meaning that fracking has been stopped, or it has been banned almost. I saw some headline, not so much headlines, but video titles, things like that, where people were suggesting it has been banned. I haven't dug deeply into it, but from just some quick observations here and there, it's not banned. It's just been put onto a moratorium, and the emphasis has been moved from government approval to corporate investment. So if the corporations are willing to invest a certain amount of money to counteract the environmental impacts, then they can still go ahead. But basically, they're putting up financial roadblocks to not so much stop it, but put off the corporations from doing it. So it hasn't really been banned. It's just been put on the shelf for a little bit. And some of this could be political manoeuvring for the upcoming election here in the UK, I suggest. Just a hypothesis that it may not be genuine, that they're actively going to ban it, because nowhere have they outright said it's banned. They just said they're putting a stop to it for now. I don't want to lessen the impact that the fracking protectors, the environmental protectors, sometimes called protesters, the fracking protesters that spent the past few years, several years for some of them, living constantly in the situation where they are trying to impede the progress of the development of fracking in the UK. There's a lot of people out there that are putting an immense amount of effort, time, effort, and energy and love into trying to slow down, at least, or preferably stop the progression of the fracking. And I don't want to lessen the impact that their continued efforts have made, but I do cynically suspect that this is more about political manoeuvring for the election. So we'll see. I really hope that they have decided that it's not suitable for the UK. It's not suitable for anywhere, but they can use that sort of saving face justification by going, oh, well, the UK geology isn't really very suitable for it, so we don't want to do it now. We'll see. I mentioned the Seattle 311 thing, didn't I? I think he did it on Supreme Lord Commander. Check out Jeff C's podcast on it. I did chat with Jeff C over the weekend about Halloween and Halloween movies particularly. You'll find that on his Jeff C live channel. We spent I think it was about 3 hours something, just talking about horror movies. The Halloween effect of all the horror movies being brought out again, and how some of the elements of those movies and the script writing and the kind of ideas that are presented to the public via that medium can be part of bigger agendas, more mass manipulation of societies rather than just the individual who's watching the horror movie. That was interesting conversation. And just to mention order, Burko's gone. He might still be kicking up a fuss in politics though for a while. He doesn't seem to be wanting to just disappear into the background of retirement. He's quite happily parading himself around now that he's a notoriety, infamous Speaker of the Houses of Parliament. I could just rant about Parliament, but I just wanted to mention the fact that order, and Epstein did not kill himself. Can somebody mash them two together? Order. Although here in the UK, you're not allowed to use video clips of the proceedings of Parliament. Certainly not if you're doing it for comedy value. They don't like having the piss taken out of them. And The other main thing I did sort of put in my notes as well. I was tempted to put it in the subtitle this week about the Daddy. I'm waiting to see when he gets resurrected again, because in the past, if you don't get it, I'm talking about Baghdadi. Who's your Baghdadi? In the past, there's been variable gaps of time between his supposed death and then re-emergence, being resurrected. So, maybe it's a bit too soon for me to mention Daddy. Maybe it might take another few, several months or years even, and then all of a sudden he'll pop up again. But this is something that I mentioned last week. On Wednesday, I think we sort of talked about it. The magical ability of certain bad guys to be killed and yet come back again and again and again. Has nobody ever wondered whether these guys zombies? What's going on here? Because they seem to get killed off. We're told official sources say that they guarantee that they got him. We got him. He's dead. And then within a certain amount of time, they're in the news again, and they're doing naughty things again. Are these the superhero bad guys and their superhero abilities? The fact that you just can't really kill them because they keep coming back because they're actually zombies. So is it Daddy, not Baghdadi? And is he gonna start showing his age a bit? Some of the bits flaking off or whatever, like traditional zombies, or maybe that's part of the trickery. We've been told zombies look a certain way, but actually they look like Baghdadi. Yeah, I'm just deliberately being silly, but really it adds into another situation. It's the main thing that I just wanted to mention tonight, the situation in North Syria, where it is that Kurdistan, or what is supposed to be Kurdistan, and Turkey and Syria, and the involvement of others in that area, other nation states and other power groups. You may not have noticed it wasn't exactly mentioned on much of the news recently, but supposedly the Hamas fired some rockets into Israel, although Hamas haven't claimed responsibility for the attack. No Palestinian groups have claimed any responsibility for that attack. The Israeli Iron Dome, the dominance of the dome, supposedly successfully got rid of that attack, negated that attack, but some people were hurt. So on that justification, Israel has started attacking Gaza again. As they always do, they say they're attacking military targets, but of course there's other people killed at the same time. There's collateral damage, as they would call it. And this is all part of a pattern that they've repeated again and again and again and again. I say they, as in the nation state that calls itself Israel. And they have ignored UN sanctions about this, them contravening human rights and war crimes and all kinds of stuff. It's well over 70. I can't remember the exact number. It's probably knocking on 80 plus now. 80 plus UN sanctions, and they just ignore them, and the rest of the world just takes no notice of the fact that they ignore them, even though whenever somebody else does something similar, the UN's there and all the world stage is there going, oh, look at those naughty people contravening the UN rulings. But Israel gets away with it quite happily, and they play this repeated pattern where, just by coincidence, some naughty people in Palestine are shooting firework rockets at us, so of course we've got to go in there with the full force of military supplied by the funds of the rest of the world, primarily America, but also most of the other nation states that give money to Israel, which then converts it into military armaments, and they proceed to bomb the shit out of Gaza or another area of Palestine. So that's happened recently. As I say, you may not have seen it much in the news over here because they don't tend to mention it much when this occurs. Occasionally they will, and usually it's tied into other narratives that are happening. But this is something that happens repeatedly, methodology. Oh man, I can't say it. Words just ain't working tonight. Methodically. There you go. No, I got it. It happens methodically to the same pattern where they play out this narrative, and it almost always, every time, happens in the background of other major stuff that's occupying the world media and the world's attention. So while the stuff is happening in northern Syria, which Israel also has a hand in because of them claiming the Golan Heights not so long ago, because of that happening with the Kurdish people and the Americans, oh, look, get the oil. And they've been plastering images of the American troops rolling up with flags waving around the oil wells, you know. So that's not a military operation, that's a photo opportunity. You know, military operations don't go down the road with a big, massive flag on the top of every truck, waving it to go, oh, look, we're US troops here, look. They don't do that in general. That's done for when there's cameras around. So they're making a big thing about the fact that the American forces, which supposedly were pulled out or moved out the way so Turkey could go in and do their thing, those American forces are now occupying the oil wells in Syria that have become unprotected because the Kurdish forces have had to go elsewhere because of them dealing with Turkey. Strange connection of coincidences of these narratives going off at the same time. Hey, rest of the world, look at what America's doing. Don't forget, we just killed Baghdadi. We just got him. Who's your Baghdadi? Oh, look at our troops rolling up around the oil wells. Meanwhile, bomb Gaza. So, on one side, fear, on the other side, populism revealing itself as imperialism, because usually the imperial masters are supposedly popular. You know, if you look at the general historical literature of the period, or talking about that time period, Queen Victoria was very popular. And the imperial rule of Britain was very popular. That's called popularism, which basically means the largest number of people agreeing that they like a certain thing or a certain individual figure, monarchy, queen, king, whatever, or politician like Disraeli. That's popularism. They're voting for the feel-good factor, not for the actual factual details of policy and decisions and voting patterns of that said person, politician, representative, whatever, you know, the actions of that monarch. No, they're voting because whenever they're shown an image of that monarch, it gives them a feel-good sense. They're voting for a brand, not for the actual actions and deeds of that person operating within their office. You know, if they were actually doing their job that they supposedly do. People are being deliberately presented with that extreme polarization choice. I know this is a topic that I've often talked about and it gets mentioned regularly, the kind of left-right agenda principle. But I was thinking about it again from the point of view of seeing that classic pattern roll out of, oh, look at us, world stage, everybody look at what we're doing at the moment. Meanwhile, you look just behind them and somebody's getting beaten up in the background, you know, while everybody's watching the dancing clown. The clown world being led by the guy who wears the floaty hair and the false teeth that he can't admit are false teeth because he's a clown, he's wearing a mask, he can't be himself really. You know, if you ain't noticed, I got no teeth, but I don't put my dentures in and pretend to be something that I'm not. I am without teeth, so that is what you see without teeth. But he can't do that. His ego doesn't allow him to be that way, and the whole ship of state of the idol of the POTUS, a president of the US, requires a certain kind of imagery so that the majority of the populace have that figure to look up to give them the feel-good sense. I'm generalizing a bit when I say fear to the left of me, populism to the right, and here I am stuck in the middle with... You fill in that last word because you can come up with a few different words that rhyme in there, and I think they're all appropriate. If anything, some of them are more appropriate than others and a lot more contextual, certainly in the kind of reference I'm trying to point at here of the influences that are being played out. Recently, not so long ago, within the last few days, and this is connected to the UK election, but Trump was making comment about how he thinks it would be great if Farage and Boris could get together and form an alliance. And then when I was checking the news earlier today, and I saw Farage making comments about how Boris needs to join with us and make an alliance so we can get this stuff sorted out. And I won't stand, I won't run for Prime Minister, but I'll happily join an alliance with the Conservatives so that we can have a strong Brexit party. And Trump's going, Trump thinks it'd be a good idea as well. Populism to the right. Don't go to the left. Be afraid of going to the left. The left is Jeremy Corbyn, and everybody knows he's an anti-Semite. Be afraid of JC. You can't have JC for Christmas. Maybe that makes sense. I'll put that in the subtitle this week. JC is not for Christmas. You're not allowed to have JC for Christmas. No. You got to have Boris and Farage. You got to have the popularism that's being presented as the right. It's all still part of the same delusion of picking one side versus the other, thinking that one is going to be better than the other and make a difference. Meanwhile, the agenda is still going to carry on. Here I am, fucked in the middle by insert word here. And don't forget, Epstein didn't kill himself. That narrative as well. Weirdly, woven into this whole scenario as well. Because when you start digging down through the rabbit hole, not go down the rabbit hole, dig that rabbit hole up so you can see how the different tunnels connect together. There's Trump and there's Epstein, there's the Clintons, there's the Bibi Netanyahu, there's the Jared Kushner, and all these interconnections playing out at the same time, being presented to the general populace through this medium that is supposedly news, but week after week becomes more like a comedy tragedy, a tragic comedy, a classic Greek tragic comedy play that is being portrayed before us, and even has the kind of cartoonish bad guy figures like Baghdadi and the over-the-top imperialistic heroic figures like Trump or Boris, even to a certain degree, or he's a bit like a court jester more than anything else. So this push left and right doesn't just apply to politics or that kind of political question. It's applying also to what's going on a geopolitical level, but it obviously goes beyond just the sphere of politics, even on a global level. This is verging into, or is coming out of, I should say, really, it's verging into our world, your daily interactions, by the fact that the agendas are being continued, whether left or right gets into power one way or the other. Even though they're presenting one side as being the creators of all the fear, be afraid of the left because the left is communist or socialist and they want you to lose your individuality totally into the Borg collective mindset. Be afraid of the void. Oh. And of course, they'd use fear to represent the right as well, certainly, sometimes. but really it's presented as the popularist, the underdog that is supposedly, in reality, is supported by more people than the supposed general political majority. The political majority supposedly is back in the left, which is why they constantly, certainly in the general media and the alternative media, they're presented as that kind of underdog. So the right is presented as the underdog, the left is presented as the dominant current majority political ideology. So it's the thing you should be afraid of, and you should be looking to go the other direction. And I'm sort of, I'm carrying on a little bit from some of the stuff I've talked about over the last couple of weeks, talking about the pyre men. Who is it that lights the fire that either makes you afraid or draws you in, one or the other, like a moth to the flame? And then we get to flextension. I still do. I was going to say I used to, but I still do. I'm doing it constantly. I like to play with language, play with the English language, because you can do a lot with the English language because of the way it's structured and the fact that certain words are used for multiple different meanings dependent on context. There's a lot of scope for you to move stuff around. So it's really good for puns and play on language games and jokes and stuff like that. And I enjoy that kind of thing. So, yeah. But when I saw him say flextension, now that they've agreed to having the election, and this was just after Boris getting his supposed non-deal deal, they announced there's going to be this flextension, which means it's going to go into January before they start talking about Brexit again. It made me think, well, here we go. Now they're sort of catching up to the fact that the English language can be moved around and used in different ways, and modern sort of text speak of people doing things like taking all the vowels out of what they want to say, but it still makes sense, and it saves them microseconds of their intensely, desperately needed microseconds by having to move their thumbs a bit further. By removing all the vowels, yet the language is still understandable to an English language speaker. And you can look at a sentence, take all the vowels out of it, you'll still be able to understand what that sentence says. Your mind can automatically fill in those vowel gaps because you're used to reading the language with the vowels there. But that made me think, oh, okay, yeah, now the sort of mainstream media is co-opting the observations of how you can manipulate language in this fashion, even to the extent of things like the woke culture and the manipulation and the redefining of language and words so that they can manipulate what they mean to people. When I've said in the past, one love, and I say that to some people, certainly online, I've encountered a lot more people. If you say one love to them, they go, you're a Satanist. Huh? You think the word love means Satanism? You're crazy. They've messed with your head terrible. If you think that word equals that, you are letting them tell you what that word means. And you're manipulating your own thinking to fit the new definition that they've given you. So, flextension, does that not imply that it's an extension that could just go on forever? Because it's flexible? Yeah, how far is flexible? Look up the definition of flexible. There isn't really any boundaries to flexible. It's not that kind of word and definition. Yeah. So potentially the extension could go on forever because it's flexible. I doubt it will because of other things that are going to start happening soon. But that was basically about it. That I was thinking about over the last several days, the situation of the fear on one side and the feel-good sense on the other, which I'm referring to as popularism. I'm giving it a political science label, but really it's just about the feel-good factor. and how most people are just not even noticing that they're like a ping pong ball being batted from one side to the other. And I'm quite happy to say, to concede the fact that that is the perception that is being portrayed within the general media, within most of the media. It is being portrayed in that fashion, that people are choosing one side or the other. The reality is not really like that. It's somewhere in between those two boundary lines, like the zigzaggy, fuzzy line. But while they're playing that ping pong game, you may not have noticed that there's a lot of changes been occurring. Changes occurring. What's occurring? I'll do a quick screen share to just a couple of stories. One of them being the fact that I said, hello, ladies and gentlemen. Shout out to that guy, Scott Webb. He put up a video just earlier, not long before we're going to start the show, mentioning about how the theatres now have new guidelines that say they should not use the terminology ladies and gentlemen anymore because some people might be offended. So I hope you're offended. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Are you offended? I know I'm being silly again, but it's one way of pointing out the craziness of this politically correct craziness. That window, that one. It's sort of loosely connected to some of the stuff I've been talking about. The way there is this connection between certain influence groups, which unfortunately it has to be said, because, and I say unfortunately just because this opens up the possibility of being accused of being some particular label, but the real root of a lot of this is based on religious ideologies and nothing to do with any kind of reality that we're all sharing. It's more about, power groups that are based on religious justifications that claim that they're the ones that are the only ones that have the right to everything, to the entire planet and everything on it, including you, the creatures that inhabit that planet. But I caught this from listening to Mark Windows' podcast, and they mentioned it. He was talking with Piers Corbyn, and they mentioned that the Vatican had launched a smart, connected e-rosary to help people pray. If you've never seen the movie THX1138, if you get the chance, it's on the share page, spam, whatever. I won't play it, but just to show you an image. In that movie, it's set in the future, and rather than a church, people go to booths, like a telephone box booth, where they have an interaction with an electronic Christ. There are no longer any direct interactions with priests. They are done through a virtual machine instead. And that's a row of the booths that he goes into. That's basically what this is doing. But the one thing that isn't so much delved into in that movie, and that part of the movie, is that these devices, these so-called smart devices, and the software that goes with them, and the cloud-based system that is all interconnected into it, give them a lot more options than just a, as it is in the movie, a recorded message. It's a tape recorded message. There's different options on the tape recording that get played, but it's somewhat limited in its ability to manipulate the information, the message. Whereas with the smart technology and the software on it, there is a whole lot of things that they can be doing with the information that is going backwards and forwards. As one simple thing, they can create group projects for certain things. So praying for environmental problems, so the device will suggest that you pray about climate change. So this gives them a lot of control about what propaganda, what narratives are presented to whoever it is that's using the app. And of course, it will be recording all your information, and much like the tape recording system in THX, they'll be taking note of your information. And if you look into some of the biggest companies that do a lot of the internet-based software, and you find that a lot of them either originate from or still based in that certain Middle Eastern nation. And again, like I said, some of this stuff might seem unconnected, but it's all adding into a certain narrative that is being enabled, funded, and fueled by a certain group, power group, let's call them that, because if you say other certain labels, then you're considered to be naughty. But this is just according to one particular Tory MP, certain, what's his name, Tory chair, James Cleverly, he cleverly says that Jewish families will leave the UK if Jeremy Corbyn wins general election. So, like I said earlier, JC is not for Christmas. You're not allowed to have JC. I'm not suggesting that means he's good, and I'm not suggesting that means you should be going out and voting for JC. I'm trying to make a point of how there are just, I certainly think that it's far beyond statistical chance that these things are all occurring together around the same time, following the same kind of narrative, or certainly very much aligning to the same narrative. I know, again, it's somewhat of a play on words, the strange coincidence that Jeremy Corbyn's initials are JC, and we happen to be having a Christmas election, and a lot of the groups that are against him are funded and ideologically aligned to these groups that I've mentioned, like it says in that headline. This is just really, really freakily weird coincidences. Or could it be that there's some kind of longer, bigger narrative script that is being adhered to, and when the certain power groupings have at least access to, if not direct influence on, where the media is being created and how it gets propagated and how the internet traffic moves around on the super internet highway, does it seem just like a crazy conspiracy connection coincidence? Well, I should say coincidence theory rather than conspiracy theory. I don't know. I'm trying to point it out from the point of view of leaving it somewhat open. I can quite happily sit here and say, I think it's this and this and this, and I can say it as if it's clearly defined and whatever. That's from my point of view. I think I've seen more than enough of this kind of evidence and the repeated patterns that equate to evidence, that I can confidently say, yes, this is happening because of these influence groups. This is not a natural occurrence. These are not coincidences. But I try to present it in a way that leaves it somewhat open so you can, look at this stuff for yourself. And if you want to say I'm just a crazy, cynical conspiracy theorist, then yeah, great. I'm thinking about stuff. That's what conspiracy theorists do. They think about things. Well, if they genuinely do, Some people just pick up an idea and say, I believe it, I buy it, run with it. Print it on a t-shirt and start making money, selling t-shirts. Where? Have you bought my latest book? It's available now. It's called And Epstein Did Not Kill Himself. Available in all good bookstores, but only on Kindle. Anyway, I'll shut up now. I think I've rambled and ranted around the subject and done my usual kind of, pointing at things that are a little bit ambiguous, but hopefully you can see how there is an interwoven connection of narratives going on here that add up to a larger agenda. Some of this stuff may seem strangely just random coincidences, like the fact that Trump could pull out a Trump card of "we got Baghdadi, way, oh, do you forget about me being obnoxious for a little bit now? You know, am I a good guy again now? Am I the big hero again now?" Yeah, these coincidental timings of things. Anyway, yeah, sorry, join him.
Yeah. If you could screen share my thing, because I've got an interesting thing here. This was from Rick Levine's monthly astrology. Yeah, now let me read out from here. Mercury turned retrograde on Halloween and backpedals until November the 20th. But the winged messenger is flying this way and that way through its shadow from October the 11th until December the 7th. So you know when a planet goes retrograde, it goes back over the point where it's been before. Well, that started on October 11th, and that's called the shadow, because that's where the planet will be coming back and then going forward again, emphasizing all aspects of information exchange. You notice the Brexit deal was cancelled on October 31st when Mercury went into retrograde. The hidden energy spills out all over this month as Mercury stays in Scorpio for an extended period of time. Additionally, Mars squares Pluto on November the 5th. That's what's in the image, stirring up more psychic detritus. Mercury and the Sun sextile Pluto on November the 9th and 13th respectively, emphasizing things that arise from the darkness. Mars enters Scorpio on November the 18th to underscore this message of intense communication and action. So this is Mars, the red line is Mars squaring Pluto, which is a bad aspect. All the blue ones are good. And if we go forward to here, we'll see that's a little bit better. And if we go on a little bit more, we get Mercury, that's with the moon, which doesn't really make a lot of difference. But, yep, by November the 12th, we've got Mars in harmony with Jupiter and everything looking a lot better. November the 12th. So that's a good day to look forward to. The other thing I wanted to show is this. Chilean president councils APEC, which is the Association of Pacific Economic things, yeah? It's
Asia Pacific Economic Council.
Yeah, that's it. So they had to cancel the APEC meeting because 20 people at least have been murdered by the police in Chile. In fact, the guy from Roger Waters from Pink Floyd put up a video about the Chileans the other day. They've also had to cancel the climate summit. Now, this is rather important, according to them, because this was when they was all going to ratify the Paris Agreement, which says we're going to put the Paris Agreement into operation in 2020, and we'll all sign up to that at Chile. So they haven't actually signed up to it quite yet. So to me, this is the Mercury and the communications all becoming garbled. So like you say, on the one hand, you have the authorities knowing these things, knowing that there's a communication is down, is disrupted, yeah? And then the election will be just after Mercury retrograde finishes, which we saw in America a couple of years back. Mm-hmm. But in the real world, where the planets actually do have an effect on things, yeah, and people aren't just tying in their actions to it, you get this you get this thing in Chile where they're cancelling 2 big summits of communication because communications are down because people are Pluto is death, Mars is violence.
Yeah.
And I mean, so you see these 2 things playing out in Chile, but in the rest of the world, they've known about these things for so long now that they actually, they fit their policy around these planetary movements. So what they're doing feels inevitable. The only thing with that is, if they don't like the position of the planets, they'll do the exact opposite, and that doesn't work. Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, in reality, Gary, it's like, you're dealing with a load of lies and cheats. I mean, Boris Johnson there, you mentioned when on the 31st, he did quote this as saying, if it didn't go through, you'd find him dead in a ditch.
Yeah.
I remember him saying that on the 31st, if it didn't happen, answering journalists when they're firing all the questions at him and stuff, to say it's definitely happening. That was a few weeks leading up to the date that didn't happen, like a few days ago.
Mm.
So yeah, you got to deal with all that as well, haven't you? The deception lies down here, and I think the way that they manipulate the energy, and we've talked about that many times on here as well. People think all this stuff is, doesn't have any effect. Well, yeah, I think it does, because you can link most of this stuff and other stuff as well to events that are happening all over the place in the past and to come. And energy does affect everybody. The full moon, the lunatic. Oh, it's all linked in. People don't think of these things, but it's if you ask a doorman who works on a door in a pub or whatever, and when does he get most trouble with people? And he gets maybe a bit of grief now and again, but when does most trouble occur? It's around about the full moon.
Yeah.
There was a sheriff in America who was famous for that. I mean, he was a sheriff for 30 years, and when he retired, he took home like a copy of all the logbooks. Yeah, he did a statistical analysis proving that there's more trouble on a full moon. Yeah, over the course of years and years. Yeah.
So if that has an effect, and like say all the other planets have an effect, we know with personalities and people born under certain types of what they call energy, water or air or earth, that sort of thing, you can tell to sort of, I think you can tell certain people if they're fiery or they're earthy or they're whatever, or water or more placid, whatever, you can tell these characters in people. So that has an effect on your actual, goes much deeper. You can open it all up into all sorts of deep stuff, but yeah, it has an effect on us, is what I'm saying. There is an effect. And people dismiss that effect and think it's just all bollocks. It doesn't mean anything. But when you go deeper into these things and you see, just open your eyes more with a bit more awareness, you can see it. Well, I have all my life anyway. So anyway,
I do agree. I've seen the same thing over my lifetime. I know it sounds a bit like you're sort of categorizing people. People do fit the general description.
Yeah,
certainly of the element of their star sign, even if they don't, totally match up to the star sign description itself. Every star sign is based on one of the four elements, and almost guaranteed every time they match their element. It's just that they might have some slight discrepancies to the standard definition for their star sign. But I think that's because for most people, you're not ruled by just one body. So trying to define you as being just totally sort of stereotypical star sign, is this. No, there's some extra nuance there that means you're not all, you don't encounter people that are absolutely 100% exactly the description of their star sign.
The
other thing I wanted to ask is, do you think then that they are playing deliberately on that retrograde period so that they're going to have more confusion, so therefore the likelihood of a hung parliament is going to be higher? Because in a state, if they're going to have all the election propaganda during this time of the retrograde, then the general populace is going to be left with, pretty much no indication of which side they should go with.
Yeah, well, Mercury communication going retrograde doesn't mean everybody shuts up. If anything, they all shout twice as loud.
It just means communication doesn't work very well. That's what it means, really, isn't it? It's failing.
Yeah, so everybody's shouting twice as loud. But as for the star signs, I mean, you stop thinking about the stars and think about a woman who's pregnant and how many hours of sunlight she sees all day, and the fact that melatonin passes the blood placenta, umbilical cord. Not all chemicals in the body can pass to the womb, but the melatonin can, which measures the time of day. So, the baby kind of knows what period of the year that it's groaning, yeah? And then you can add, if you want to go back further, you can add to that certain things like, the diet. Well, the diet changes through the year. But, for a start, the melanin.
How much water they take in and stuff like that.
I think our ancient ancestors had means and methods to tune in, to certain planets and things of this nature. Like we know about certain energies of certain planets, like Saturn and other ones that and they just had that ability. They've got the remnants still here, circles, Stonehenge, places like that, the pyramids. They all sort of link in energetically, universally. They're not just connected here. Some are, I think Avebury's actually connected to here, the Avebury stone circle, but some are in homage to, drawing energy off planets and things of this nature at certain times. So so they had that, people, that's the sort of ancient knowledge stuff. And, that's the sort of, we just get little snippets now in our sort of, what would tell us, like you'd say, with this sort of work. And we know astrology, it's, it's, you can spend your whole life, being sort of looking at these things, charts, and learning it, and all the rest of it. And it's,
Well, and you see, you mentioned the moon earlier on. They didn't have television. So what happens when, a couple of thousand years ago, you notice that people change a bit when the moon is there, and you start looking up to the planets, and you actually do start tuning yourself higher and higher. There's no television to distract you. And you become these wandering holy men because you're actually really up there on a high frequency. Nothing.
I thought you was going to say they set up a deck chair and sit and watch the lunatics. That was their TV. It's like, hey, yeah, it's going to be a full moon again soon. Let's get some nuts and berries, and we'll sit up there and we'll watch all the lunatics cavorting in the moonlight.
Well, I keep seeing the things pop up. The Dogon tribe and things like this keep popping up, and you think about the ancient, cultures or ancient ancestors, that sort of stuff, and there's the information that they had or we got hold of in, say, 1902. They found, someone discovered this ancient tribe and found out all their knowledge, and they were telling all this stuff, or whenever it was, but it's that kind of I don't know, it just doesn't get enough sort of attention in that way. In a sense, it's almost like, well, when we developed the telescope, then that's when we could see the Sirius or Dog Star, Sirius, whatever. And the sort of the most amazing bit is forgotten. Well, wow, how did these guys know this? Or it's just left behind. It's not given the, like I say, that sort of more attention that people would want to know, because you'd think, well, hang on a sec, that's the stuff that would expand our awareness of our existence on this planet, would it not? So, it's the sort of stuff they don't want you to really know too much about, or it's just a fascinating fact on YouTube, in the top 10, whatever. So
in another religious connection, I think I've mentioned this before, the concept of the firmament is part of Christian theology as well as others, but Christian theology really fixated on this, the idea that there is this firmament that God put in place. And in effect, it was like putting a dome over the world. And if you break apart the word, you look at the etymology or whatever, firme, from the French anyway, or from the Proto-Indo-European root, whatever, firme means to close or to shut, or it also implies strong. So in the sense of like a strong door, like a castle door is shut. Firmament means not only the strong mind, but the strongly enclosed mind. And in a theological sense, what it was representing is that, like, don't question outside the lines, don't question outside the boundaries of what we tell you what is. So in other words, we want you encapsulated in this version of reality that we tell you it's like this and that's all you need to know. You're not allowed outside of that. It is closed off to you. So any connection, because the Dogon is one of a really good example, really, really good example, but there is other stuff out there that gives that impression. It's like nobody has come up with any good suggestion as to how these people would have had that information, but they did. So the fact that they have it makes you have to question. It's like, well, hang on a minute, how did they get that information? Does that mean somebody in the ancient past had technology that was beyond us until recent times, because it was the 60s when they first found this out. Yeah?
Oh, was it the 60s? Sorry, yeah.
I think it was the 70s before they actually discovered Sirius B via modern technology, and before then it wasn't known because Sirius A is so bright it occludes Sirius B from normal view.
Yeah.
So until modern technology was able to differentiate the two, modern astronomy had no idea that there was a Sirius B, but the Dogon knew about it. So either in their ancient past they had some kind of technology that surpassed us up until recently, or somebody else gave them the information. And then that makes you question, well, was there somebody else from somewhere else? In other words, not from Earth. So that makes you think outside of that firmament. Yeah. So the whole purpose of the religious groups being so determined to naysay or obliterate this kind of information and knowledge is because it makes you think outside of their control. It makes you question what they're telling you, because there is evidence that shows that they're wrong. So therefore they don't know it all. So therefore you question, well, if you're wrong about that and you don't know it, then what else are you wrong about? And their whole idea of dominance falls apart because you question their authority. Sorry, long-winded answer.
Oh, no, and that's the thing. And
basically just agreeing with you, but I feel it's very relevant. And certainly in terms of like the stuff we've been talking about, the election and all this kind of, political shenanigans going on and whatever. And yet there is a really, really good example of how information can be controlled over centuries.
Oh, yeah.
Because it was only something like the 60s when the anthropologists spent time living with them and found out this information. But I don't think that means that nobody else had ever encountered them and the information before then. It was just that it was in that time period of the 60s with those anthropologists that actually recorded it, and it got put into the academic body. But I bet you there were other people who knew about this shit before. And it was probably recorded in places like the Vatican archives and whatever. They would have squirreled that kind of information away. It's like some of the stuff to do with giants and whatever. Yeah, I know sometimes these kind of subjects can be silly or seem silly, but there is information and evidence that is hidden from the general populace because it causes questions to the authority. And when they want you to just obey and follow like a sheep, then they're not going to allow you to know this stuff. They don't want you to know it because it makes you question, etc.
Yeah, might realize you're just being used. You're a slave. Yeah.
Political stuff. It's like, don't question us about why. It just seemed like magic that Baghdadi all of a sudden was killed again. Don't question the fact that there's no evidence from his body that we can present to you. We haven't shown you the genetic analysis that we claim proved his identity 100%. Oh, no, not allowed to question that. You just have to believe and obey.
And then even how ludicrous it gets, like we mentioned last Wednesday about finding his underwear to prove who he was.
That's like such a classic cliche. I can remember that joke when I was a kid in the 70s and 80s. Maybe not 70s, 80s certainly. It's like, my doctor wanted to put me through some tests. He said he needed a semen, blood, urine, and stool sample, so I just gave him my underpants.
That's one of the old ones, isn't it? I think someone put that in the comment last week as well. Yeah, the oldies are the goodies, the golden oldie jokes.
And it's the same kind of principle as well. As you can't teach an old dog new tricks, but you can teach a new dog old tricks. Remember, I did an episode about this kind of point. Some of the stuff that we see like that is repeated again and again and again because they know it works fairly well. If not 100%, it works on the majority of people, so they just keep repeating the same patterns. That's why a study of history, or a broad view of global history, including what's happening at the moment, contemporary history as well, because it's all contextual. usually helps people see beyond that kind of short-term ignorance of pattern repetition. Because when you start looking at things long-term, you can go, hang on a minute, how many times have they killed Baghdadi? How do they keep getting away with telling the same story again and again and again? Because it's new dogs learning old tricks, not old dogs trying to learn new tricks.
And I think it's that bombardment of news and the amount of news coming out. People, seeing lots of different stories each day coming out, and they can't comprehend it or forget quickly, or they're moving things so fast. It seems,
They do seem to do that deliberately. I know
Yeah,
the normalization effect.
Yeah, and everyone's so quick, like I mentioned, attention spans and flicking through things and flicking through feeds and and all that stuff. We've all been sort of changed in how we react or how long we spend looking at stuff, and it's just the headline grabber, isn't it, or whatever, and they stick in the head or whatever. When you go to the mainstream sites,
Got the stuff Gary's showing there.
Exactly, like here we go. In Durham, I was going to think, it's not Anton Deck involved in this, is it, Gary? Yeah, yeah.
This is a zombie spice smoker street in Newcastle, I think. But it's interesting that this was a recommended article to read after reading about possibly opening a cannabis club. And I mean, the things that they're saying about the cannabis club, the good people, are absolutely true. Yeah, if there's anybody dealing hard drugs, but the cannabis club are going to be the first person to phone the police. Yeah, they don't want any trouble. They want their license and they want to make their business. And, police have to say, oh, it will increase drugs and all the rest of it. This is the same police force that have already said we think they should be legalised. And we don't prosecute people.
Government causes an increase in drug use.
Well, as well, when you were saying about them, they're preparing for a lot of things to happen. The stick is coming down. This is part of the carrot, yeah? Legalisation of cannabis.
Yeah, JC has already said, and Labour said this multiple times in the past, although I haven't heard him say it within the last few days or a week or so in terms of the coming election, but he has mentioned it not so long ago that they will consider legalizing cannabis. As far as I remember, I might be paraphrasing a bit, but as far as I remember, the way it was worded is that they will consider it. Not that they're going to absolutely do it, but again, like you say, it's being held out as a carrot.
Well, just like the fracking thing, and I think they usurped Labour there, didn't they? The Tories doing that at the weekend, because they were going to do that in there, because neither party's published any manifesto yet, I don't believe. So
no, not that I've seen. No.
We haven't seen any detail yet of the lies and bullshit and the things that they're not going to do. They'll do none of it. They tend not to do any of it. They do the opposite. Yeah. So yeah, we'll see.
Election manifesto promises never come to pass.
No.
Not really. Not in the fruition or in the way it's presented to the public initially when they suggest it. Be aware as well, I suppose this is sort of like personal note connection for me. So Labour have also said, JC himself said, that if they get in, they will scrap the current benefit system, universal credit, and they'll set something new up, which basically means for those people who are on benefits or benefit claimant of any kind, it basically means you'll get the same effect as you had the last time, where they'll make you reapply for everything. They'll send you through a fuckload of tests again. They'll make you fill out loads of forms again. And then they'll end up giving you the same amount of money. It's just it'll have a different name on it this time.
And I'll tell you what else is different this time round, or it seems different. We have a third player involved in the general election, which seems to be Mr. Trump. Yeah, he seems to be giving, lots of advice and opinion, and he's obviously very close friends with Mr. Farage, and they've been having some nice cozy little conversations on, I think it's that LBC radio station. He's got his own little show there, and they've been having little hour chats and whatever, and he seems to be sort of playing a role, doesn't he? And
you could say this in a good way, but Trump has been one of the most available presidents of the US ever. And when I say available, I mean the fact that he'll turn up on a show like Farage's podcast. Right, you really put yourself out there, but it's always like, somewhat selective, obviously, because you don't like CNN and people like that, But it's the fact that maybe you could just say it as he's very media savvy.
Well,
which is a thing for a salesman. You've got to understand the media, haven't you? Because you're a salesman, so you're trying to sell shit.
I was going to say it didn't work out so well for Alex Jones, did it, when Trump turned up on his podcast a few times for his show? So maybe he's like the kiss of death, the poison in the water. So, if you know him, it's all going to turn to shit.
That's where I feel anyway, this is the way I see it. We get back to the reality that he may be being presented as a popular figure or popularist figure, as in they present him in such a way that he's got this kind of underdog persona where he's fighting the deep state bad guys, and he's trying to fight for the little guy who's working hard and striving to be having a better life and all that kind of stuff, all that kind of American dream stuff. But the reality is that they don't actually really want you to go that direction. What they're trying to do is they're presenting you a fake idol that you'll move towards, so that then when the kickback comes, when the pendulum swing goes back the other direction, you'll go back further. Because if they keep pulling the extremes apart, then they know that when the swing back happens, you go further the other direction. And the plan to take us into that singular world structure that they've been building, that relies on a technocracy infrastructure to make it happen, it's far more than just communism, but most people would comprehend it as communism or socialism. So that for the general populace to accept the changes that they're bringing in, that's quite a far step to one side. So to get the pendulum momentum to reach that far, they have to pull back much further. So they present this current uprising of the popular right is because they need to pull the pendulum back that far, so that once they actually let go and push the other direction again, it will swing as far the other side that they actually want. So even
the eventual answer will be something right in the middle. I think. The United Nations coming in, like it's the climate people. Everybody now is saying, Extinction Rebellion, they are going too far, but they accept that climate change is happening and it's man-made. The right wingers. So the final path will be somewhere in the middle.
I've described it before as they ask for a mile so that you will give an inch, and over time, gradualism, a process of gradualism, those inches add up to the mile that they asked for in the first place. It's just that it might be your grandchildren that experience that mile difference. You experience an inch per year. Every year they ask you for a mile, you give an inch.
You
After
can have
a lifetime, it adds up.
I was going to say, you can have a flex extension. You can have. You can be flex extended. It's like... Sorry.
I saw an article Mark Salon covered today in the news, and there was a recommendation that certain drugs that have gone out of copyright, and are open, should be allowed to be sold to the NHS or something, cheaper, to save the NHS money. And it was a government minister for health who filibustered. In other words, he stood up for about 30 minutes talking so the bill couldn't go through. And he has direct links to the pharmaceutical industry. I mean, what can you do when the conflict of interest, the corruption is that fucking blatant for everybody to see? What can you do? I mean, do you remember the helicopter scandal? With one of Thatcher's guys, wasn't it? Hasseltine. He was out in Saudi Arabia and he had dodgy connections with the helicopter company and he took a packet of money and it was a big scandal. This guy standing up in Parliament, you know, and everybody knows what he's doing. He's been paid by the pharmaceutical company to keep this bill out so that he'll make more money. And everybody knows he's doing it.
I think they've always done it, but then they'll just pick on those. Remember Al Fayed when he got was done for Cash for Questions with that other MP, the Hamiltons. Remember
Hamilton,
that? Yeah, him.
You clipped, didn't he?
yeah. And but they'll just pick out who they want at the time. You know, it's like an agenda. It's like the Peter Geddon thing. You know, they'll just throw up somebody to hate on and steam valve it. You know.
Yeah, but I mean, in the old days, the only people who knew about that were like people like ourselves, or the ones that read Private Eye. But this is so obvious; everybody can see he's doing it. Yeah, I mean, we were talking about it, probably talking about it in the Daily Mail and that. Yeah, and this happened in our Parliament. We got out there blatantly conflict of interest, and nobody's saying anything. Well, probably because Burkow's gone now, isn't it?
Well, so, look what they've. Like I say, look at the Brexit process over just the last 3 months. Yeah, you know, it's been crazy what they've been up to, what they've done, and how they're working it now, and how they've manipulated it themselves, and you know, they won't let the people decide, will they? Which they should have just got it through and done, but that wasn't going to happen because we're not coming out anyway. So
I think they sort of are in a way, because the election is going to be like a referendum.
Kind of, yeah, isn't it?
And JC, I think it was JC that said this. I know it was a Labour statement from earlier today, basically sort of plotting out their plans for what they're going to do once they're in power, what they're going to do within the first 6 months. And they stated, yeah, we'll have a second referendum. You know, Jeremy will go and renegotiate a new deal, and then we'll have a second referendum on that deal. You know, so they're disguising it as being, they're going to ask you what you think about Jeremy's deal. Yeah, but basically that's a referendum on the whole question in the first place again, isn't it? Because if you say, no, we don't like it, then flextension again. Yeah, so it's going to be another however long before they offer you another opportunity to vote.
Well, and the other thing they've been pushing again since the vote for coming out, you know, leaving Europe, was we didn't understand it correctly.
Yeah.
What? It's like, you know, how insulting is that generally anyway on people? You know, it's like, of course we understood it. We've been with it for all our lives, most of us, so we understood what we were voting for, really. I think that's just, again, another you know, tactic they've used since the vote came out, you know, to switch it back to a second vote.
I think they're actually referring to all those Alzheimer pensioners who are voting against the best interests of their grandchildren and just lost in a world of nostalgia.
Yeah,
That's the use. That's the excuse they're presenting so that they get the support of the younger voters. But the reality is that the people who've experienced the process of being part of the EU are the older people. You know, the ones that have been alive, working in this economy, in this country, since the EU association began, so since the 70s. So that is all the people that are at least pension age, you know. So the older people who've actually spent the last 30 years with that connection there, and they've gone, no, actually, we think this trial period is shit. We don't want it anymore.
And EU's turned into sort of almost a religious cult. I mean, it's the pot of gold over the rainbow. The EU will bring us heaven eventually. No, they won't.
The Wizard of Oz. It will pull its magic levers and whistles and whatever, and it will present to you whatever you desire.
Yes, but that's scary. The main scary story you showed before was the Ease Rosary Vatican smart app. Click to pray. It's like Jesus. Yeah, it's like click to pray. And
why don't you pray about climate change
today? Yeah, like send you what you should pray about. I mean, that's just, yeah, like you say, can be used in many ways. And wow, that's the.
Well, I remember at the time of the independence in Catalonia, somebody has a joke yeah, made this phone app where you can kiss the back of the king's hand. You know, you look at your phone and it looks like this, you know, with the king's hand on it. Because that's what they do now, you know. And, you know, they shake the queen's hand. But in Spain, when you go and meet the king, you can kiss his hand. Yeah, so they got a picture of the king's hand on the app.
Combine that with the fondle slab thing that I can't remember the actual name of the product, but Corbett did a little piece on it the other day, and Jeff and myself sort of had a bit of a chat about it on last episode. But a device, a thing that adds to your smartphone that has like fake silicone skin that reacts to what you do. Right, so if you pinch the skin, it causes a reaction that the app will sense. You know, stuff like if you prod it or stroke it or whatever. How about an interactive crucifixion? You know, Christ on the cross with real touch-sensitive flesh, so that you can give your confession to the Christ on the cross.
I'm not sure if that was yeah. Go on.
No, I was just going to rant about how, you know, this is beyond craziness. If this was written about in the 70s, they'd define this as psychotic and probably part of somebody's, you know, episode. They need sectioning for a few months, because if you're doing shit like that, you must be a bit out there.
I think this is one of those things that they made for maybe the handicapped, and they've released it without finding a proper, you know, niche for it. Because if you could program it yourself, in other words, you've got a mobile phone, you don't have very good, you know, manipulation of your fingers, and so you want to tap the thing 3 times in a certain place, and that will carry out a particular function. Yeah. Is that what you can do? Sorry, excuse the bus. That you can program.
I don't know if the user can program the reactions, but I'd also say that the kind of devices you're describing are already out there. They're being developed. This is something different, and I wouldn't be surprised if this has got more connection to the sex industry than anything else.
Well, it's a first step, isn't it? I mean, It's not a complete thing in itself. There's more to come. You know, watch this space.
Yeah, I think that might be why they've released it now, because they are preceding or foreshadowing into the public knowledge the fact that this technology is going to become available fairly soon, to the point that it's already commercially available as this kind of like toy for your smartphone. But also they'll use the interactions that they receive as data to help them design the future incarnations of this stuff, the future iterations of it. So they're basically asking the public to beta test it, and by how the public react to it, they'll alter it a bit. They'll perfect it, certainly making it more appropriate for things like the sex industry.
Building the paywall.
Yeah, you can't pinch you have to pay a microtransaction to pinch it.
It reminds me of the Philip K. Dick story that I read, rather than the film, where the guy is in his apartment, and he's got no money, and he can't get out of the apartment because even the front door is owned by a private company. It's a secure door, and he can't pay to get out of his own apartment. Everything is micropayments.
Well, potentially things could get to that kind of stage. Amazon is rapidly expanding its power into all aspects of life that it can. So, Amazon homes will probably happen fairly soon, if it's not arguably already happening, because now home builders are including fully fitted installations of smart home infrastructure. So in other words, when you buy your house is already installed with all the stuff you need to be able to interact directly with the Amazon home
monster
digital system. You can interact directly with your flesh walls. You can punch the walls and it will show you the latest episode of Keeping Up with the Kardashians or something.
I was gonna say, I would expect them to move into the vacation industry. But then when you think about it, a lot of hotels are very, very big businesses, and they wouldn't want to let Amazon be moving in on them. You see what I mean?
Yeah, I don't think they'd have that much choice.
Yeah, it's a possibility, but I think a lot of people like the Hilton and that, they'd rather keep Amazon out and deliver everything they can to their customer. Because once their customer is in the room, everything they want is more profit for them.
A chain like that has got somewhat of a niche marketplace, which there wouldn't be much point Amazon trying to compete with that. Whereas Amazon is more about mass and bulk, dealing with making tiny profits on mass sales. That's why, I'll tell you, you don't see a hotel chain like that negotiating a deal with the American government to supply military forces with the stuff that they need. Whereas Amazon has done that. Yeah, the US government are employing Amazon to take over parts of its own infrastructure. So when Amazon builds an entire town of what they would call cheap housing, affordable housing or whatever, those kind of big hotel chains, they ain't gonna compete with that.
Plus, if Amazon decide to go into the tourist industry, they need to have spent a lot of money in preparation. So you can go on holiday literally anywhere, with Amazon all the way, and that requires a lot of preparation, But like I said, I mean, a place like Spain, where there are a lot of cheap hotels, they'd easily be able to buy up the use of them. But in other places, not so easy.
I was going to say in the long run, but it's not going to exactly be that long away. But would they not be better off in the long run investing the same kind of money into developing the virtualized technology such that you can virtually go anywhere you want, and they can have a virtual hotel that you can visit? That environment is probably going to be more, again, where they will get their profit margin. So I know it's a dystopian cliche, but the classic example of people living in tiny little boxes where they use their virtual interaction devices to escape their life that they're currently living by going into a virtual holiday scape, where they go and have a holiday on the greatest beaches in the world or whatever, but actually they're just wearing their VR device in their little box home.
I think people will still want to go to places like Spain, and the whole hotel will then be owned by Amazon. And the reason they will still be going and taking their planes is because to offset the carbon footprint, certain people won't be allowed on planes. So it'll only be good customers of Amazon and Facebook who have been verified. But there'll still be thousands upon thousands of them.
You'll be able to buy a carbon tax credit package where the carbon tax that you're accruing, or the carbon deficits that you're accruing by going on that holiday, are going to be offset by some Indian farmer somewhere up in the hills that's going to plant several trees to offset your carbon requirement. The rich are already doing that. It's another reason why the carbon tax is total bullshit, because it's based purely on wealth. If you're wealthy enough, you can carry on being a polluter. It's, you just pay for it. It's like, I don't care if I'm creating loads of carbon, which supposedly is bad. Here you go, have a bunch of money, go away. That's why it fuels the hierarchy, because it's like the equivalent of artificial scarcity. It's more like a church, what's the word for it? Observances, where you pay to have your sins expunged.
Simony. It's called simony, but there is another word for it. The simony payments are something. Remittances? No. Not remittances.
That's what the carbon tax credit is, really. It's that kind of payment to the new religion. You're paying off your sins rather than changing the way you live because you realize that it's damaging or pollutive or whatever. Instead you just pay for it. Like I said, that's why it fuels that hierarchical system. The haves will keep getting away with it and everybody else will pay for it.
I was going to say, are those payments flexible?
Yeah.
Sorry.
You can have a flextension on that. You can have a mortgage for your carbon tax payments, and it can be a multi-generational mortgage, so your children will inherit your carbon tax fines.
Your debt, yes.
Because your carbon's still here. So even though you're dead and passed on, oh no, your children have to pay to have your carbon removed, or some other justification that they'll come up with. Let me say a quick hello, because I forgot to do it at the start. I'll say hello to people in the chat. Paula B, hello. Oh, I've got the chat all the way back to the beginning this time. Paula B, hello, I hope you're all right. And New Being, hello. That's you too. And Dotty, Cannabis Based Life Form, hello. Scrolling. Luxem Tatfro, hello. Scrolling. Stewie, hello. I'm not sure what he was asking about St. George's Day. I missed that, sorry if you're asking me a question. I only caught a bit of it then as I was scrolling past. And Dean Yates, hello. Dino. Scrolling too fast. Lewis R, hello. Any events brewing for early 2020? Well, the election, I suppose, at the end of January. Misty Ernst, hello. Neo Dog, hello. Ladies and genitals, yeah. Laddies and genitals. I'm scrolling down. Mama Bear, hello. Be like water. Yes. One of Brucey's, oh, wrong shoulder. I keep doing that because I forget the cameras. Brucey, one of Brucey's most famous quotes. Scrolling. Thanks for joining us, folks. Thanks for joining in the chat room. Patrick Nee, hello. And Alan McVicker, hello. And OMG WTF, hello. Oh my God. What the fuck? Scrolling. Lowlands Pete, hello. Hope you're alright, right? And I think I've scroll all the way through the chat. Thanks for joining us, folks. Which
quick screen share to go out.
Yeah, the memes are strong with this one. It is a really good way to. I didn't really say it at the time when I was sort of mentioning it earlier, but the oh man, what's the word for it? The pathologist that they brought in to question the autopsy is highly dubious. And I think that may have been done deliberately so that they can try and throw rubbish or throw shit at the very idea that he was murdered. So they've got this notorious doctor to come and act as the expert spokesman to claim that he wasn't, he didn't commit suicide, that his injuries look more like murder. And in doing so, for some of the public, that's going to make them dismiss the idea because it's been represented by that notorious guy. So even though it's good that that recent report clearly states that his injuries are not consistent with suicide, they are consistent with murder. It's great that they got that official report out there, but then they got this guy being the face for that. Yeah, I think they are trying to just ridicule the idea rather than genuinely investigating it.
Grenfell inquiry as well is trying to blame. Did you see that? They're trying to blame the chief of the fire brigade.
Yeah.
And Sonia Portman did a video on that. And that's shocking because it was obviously a cladding. I mean, people knew that within a week because because of online research, because of the internet, people were able to find out what the cladding was, and it was unlawful to use it.
Yeah, I said it at the time, just after the fire. I said that it was like they were stuck in an oven. It's idiotic to build something like that because it does just act like a chimney. So, if the firemen had all got there in plenty of time or whatever bullshit they're trying to claim, even if they had got there in time, they would have really struggled to save all the people.
Well, I can't believe people are falling for the mainstream narrative they're pushing out, like say blame the fire brigade, their fault, or and get the families who are obviously very upset losing people. They've channeled their anger into that as well, or whatever. And whoever said what they said, I think it was I can't remember the woman's name now, but yeah, they were again misdirected really, because it's the people, like you say, the cladding. I mean, this was all obvious when it all happened, wasn't it? And then suddenly a year or so on, or whatever, it's you can see the whitewash happening, the cover up, let's not get to the real heart of who actually bloody organised these claddings, and this was a fire trap and all the warnings they'd had beforehand and everything else. Let's not mention that. Let's forget that and just talk about the firemen, because it was their fault because they didn't get everybody out alive. I mean, yeah, great. I mean, that's what they're selling people now. That's what they're trying to, and that's how they do it. That's the whitewashing in operation in front of your very eyes.
And of course, the other thing was that the Conservatives in the Kensington district were only 30 votes short of winning. I mean, Labour won by 30 votes in the previous election. And so if they could have just started a fire and got everybody to move out, that would have been enough to probably win the constituency. Unfortunately, it got out of hand a bit too fast and people were killed. But only 30 votes, that's reason enough for anybody, any Tory, to burn down a building, isn't it?
Yeah. In the current, I was going to say environment, current atmosphere, which has been this way for a number of years now, but it's like the return to the slum landlords, where property manipulators are very much, encouraged because of the way the economic system is structured, and property ownership is provided for. The mortgage to let or buy to let, and the house flipping culture and all that kind of stuff, which is a way of instilling a justification into the general populace that it's okay to have multi-billion-dollar and multi-billion-pound hedge funds doing things like buying up that kind of property and deliberately degrading it in one way or another. Think of the Tower Hamlets in the other parts of London, deliberately degrading it so that then they can push out the original occupants, gentrify it, and increase the rents or the property value and then sell it on, or some shit. Property manipulation. And it's classically, the kind of worst elements of capitalism, like it was in Dickensian times, where the general populace or the people that live in those homes are inconsequential. It's the money that can be generated out of the property that matters. So we end up with things like slum landlords, or property developers like that entire borough, where they generate I think it's the most income of any borough in the UK. And they've got holdings and investments and whatever all over the world, and yet they couldn't spend the money to rectify that tower block.
Yeah, I think there was is it Portland Road in that area? I'm sure it is. That was the back in the 30s, 40s, 50s and onwards, especially in the property boom, they drove a lot of families out of those areas.
That's what it's about. And
Yeah.
I'm saying gentrification. That's a bit of a modern terminology that maybe doesn't, entirely cover what we're talking about. Really, this is just about property manipulation by people that are only concerned with making money, greed. Yeah, they don't care if people lose their homes or if people outright die in a fire. They just want them out so that they can do up the area and sell it to somebody for a lot more money.
Oh yeah, I mean those properties down there are worth many millions now. You're talking 20, 30 million, some of them.
Yeah, just for a terrace house.
Or
what is basically a terrace house, an Edwardian terrace house.
Yeah.
But these are the times we live in.
Yes, I mean
they are changing.
Well, they don't build them like, I mean, those sort of properties, when you look at them, they are really nice compared to what they throw up these days in the old, building projects for private homes. They're just thrown up, and bricks last only maybe 30 years, 40 years before you need to replace the entire lot. Might look great, but it won't last as long as some of these properties. At least they were built back then with, a bit more
planned obsolescence.
Yeah, well, that's what's come in now. Yeah, certainly since those days.
If they didn't include it, then the bricklayers wouldn't have any work. And obviously, it's more than just bricklayers, in the building industry. But just to simplify the rhetoric, the bricklayers wouldn't have any work. And if the bricklayers wouldn't have any work, they wouldn't be able to buy their Sun newspaper and subscribe to Sky TV and buy beer down in the pub. So that whole economic cycle would be crippled, and that would weaken your entire economy and blah, 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 capitalist justifications for the current economic status quo. So, of course, they include planned obsolescence even in the building trade. So the stuff is not built to last unless it's for the military or a governmental installation or something like that. No, but general homes for the populace, no, they're not meant to last. Because otherwise, the builders of the future wouldn't have a job building houses for the people of the future. Now, this system is very meticulously structured to be interwoven in that kind of fashion, like a house of cards. So once one thing starts being removed or falling down, the whole thing will fall apart. Like the mortgage swindle thing pointed out. I know we mentioned that a while ago. It seemed appropriate to mention it again now because we're talking about property and housing and whatever. If the majority of the populace could wrap their head around the fact that the entire mortgage game is literally that, it's a game of illusion, of fiat currency and digits that don't really exist, but it allows this economic manipulation that we call the property market, then a massive amount of the entire structure would fall apart. The banking industry would fall into that hole as well because it's all interlinked.
Yeah, and just from the very basic fact of it that you have to you borrow whatever, say 30,000, but you pay back 130,000.
Yeah,
just that alone is enough to go. Hang on a second.
The 30,000 you borrowed didn't exist until you signed that form, and your very signature causes its creation. So in other words, you created that money out of nothing. And then out of that nothingness that you've just created, you have to pay back the extra, like you said, from 30,000 to 130,000. So the bank has profited by 100 grand of your productive life, your energy that's been created out of nothingness, but they're the ones that profit from it, not you. Some people might say, well, at least I got the house. It's like, yeah, but mate, you don't really own it. That mortgage is basically just a lease. You do not own it unless you can prove you've got a Lloydial title. The house and the land it sits on belongs to the Crown. So at any moment, that thing that you think you own can be taken away from you. So therefore, you don't really own it. So what exactly have you paid for with your magic money that appeared from out of nowhere?
Nothing.
Another thing people forget is if you do that, just keep printing more money every time somebody comes up with a mortgage, that will lead to inflation. And the way that they try to put that off is by having the house prices go up faster than everything else. So they do try to keep the inflation within the housing bubble. All these bubbles burst eventually. Yeah. And like you said, the buy to let, I saw somebody on the forum the other day, or was it somewhere else, talking about having a buy to let. This was an ordinary person that got conned into it in the 90s. Yeah. Oh, you can do it as well. If you've already got a mortgage, why don't you just make it a bit longer and you can get a property and that'll pay for it. And no, it doesn't really. I doubt there are many people who have been able to do that, not unless they are upper middle class with a good income to cushion against the housing bubble bursts.
Yeah.
And then you come in and you buy cheap, but even that's not going to help you because you're still going to have to go through the whole cycle from the standpoint of a person that's only got like their own house and one to let. That's a hell of a rocky road, yeah. These big companies are buying 20, 30 houses to rent and let. Yeah.
The only people I know done that kind of thing, and they've done it in that sense of they can generate money out of it such that they live off the money they generate and whatever. It's not just letting out properties. Most of the time what they end up doing is the kind of house trading, house flipping, where from that, like you say, they've got a slush fund of money to back them up in the first place. And from that money, they'll buy a property, they'll do it up, they might let it out for a few months, a year, a couple of years, and then they sell it once the value has accrued enough for them to make a bit of profit out of it. And they might have a small portfolio of properties that they keep that are for let, for rent, but most of their money that they make is done through doing that trading process. Yeah, buy a house cheap, paint it up, decorate it, make it smart again, and then sell it on for a little bit of profit. And they keep just doing that and progressing further and further until they buy bigger and bigger houses. The profit margins increase, but obviously the risks increase because of the amount of money you're putting in, even though the money supposedly doesn't really exist. Yeah. It's all an illusionary game. It's like Monopoly. The money just keeps moving around the table. Magically, every so often, the bank just creates some more and puts it on the table, and it gets moved around again. And for a while, one person's got it, and then that gets moved to somebody else, and somebody else has got it.
Yeah, but
It's the
problem
bank
is,
who always wins, isn't it? It's always the bank who wins. The house wins.
Do you remember at school they used to have this day just before Christmas and just before you break up for the summer where you can bring in games and you just play games all day?
Yeah.
And people bring in Monopoly and that. Can you imagine somebody sitting there with a Monopoly table and you've got the old Kent Road, the really poorest one, but every other set has got a hotel on it. And the guy's sitting there like, he's going to be the banker as well. And he says, do you want to play? No, nobody would sit down and play that game. But that's what we've got. That's what we're born into, yeah.
Mm-hmm. We shall see how things change when the technocratic takeover really starts to kick in, because I think a lot more people will maybe realize or be surprised about the reality as it develops, because mortgages will also eventually fade away. There will not be anything like a mortgage. There will not be home ownership. Like I sort of mentioned near the start of my ranting, games and the gaming industry. Now, in a lot of the modern contexts, people do not own the software. In effect, you rent it. Most of the stuff that people do on their smartphones, they don't own anything. They probably don't even own the phone. The phone is part of some kind of leasing contract. The software that they buy, they don't really own that. They're just renting access to it on the cloud. And in a similar fashion as this main agenda pushes forward, including things like climate change, carbon tax credit bullshit, electronic cash, and other systems of monitoring and controlling. I was going to say mediating, but it's not in a nice way. It's more like they're taking off you to stop you doing stuff. But just the control of your ability to exchange and trade, and what accounts to property ownership and ownership. Those things are being eradicated through this virtualization into the collective cloud. So even things like home ownership will become a thing of the past. People won't own a home. You'll just lease access to a domicile, or you will be given so many credits within the electronic system, which allows you to a bed space in a shared living environment. You know, I know talked about this not so long ago, when they started leaking it out into the press about this new trend that everybody's trying, where you have these large open plan shared living spaces in city centres where people basically just buy what is bunk space, and they have a shared kitchen, shared bathroom, etc. And they're trying to sell it as trendy and popular because, like I say, there will be no home ownership. There will be no car ownership, even though arguably even now what people think they own, you don't own it. You are the registered keeper. You are not the owner. All of this stuff is going to fade away and be deliberately pushed out. It will be a leasing system where you are constantly paying for your allowed use, your liberty to make use of these things.
They're normalizing it now through music and movies by streaming and things of this nature, you know, where you're not actually buying or purchasing things anymore.
Yeah.
You know what goes to the heart of all of that? And I think it will be an indicator that people are really beginning to wake up. When people stop supporting the royal family. I mean, the same in Spain, yeah? Some people do cheer for the king. It's in Spain, not in Catalonia. And in England's the same, you know? Every time there's a royal family, there are people who are just in love with those royals, because that's where all the authority to own everything comes from. Like you said, the Queen owns everything. And as well with the banks, I mean, she is behind the banks, you know, behind everything, isn't she? She's the figurehead of all their authority, in a way. And once people start saying, well, what the hell do we have a king or a queen for anyway? I mean, what is it? What exactly is it? You know, go to somebody in the street, describe to me what a queen is, you know, and whatever they say is going to sound ridiculous. There's somebody who is born better than you, and by order of God, they're going to order you what to do. Come on, yeah, none of it stands up anymore, and yet people still support them. That's
It's the feel-good factor.
And propaganda, of course.
Yeah. But the propaganda fuels that feel-good factor. The brilliant example is Lady Di. Yeah, the lady died. The point being that how many people do you know, even if they're not a royalist, they might still have some kind of soft spot for Lady Di. You know, they might get a little bit tearful when they remember the funeral and whatever, because she had that feel-good factor. She was the people's princess and all that cheesy bullshit that went along with it. Yeah? These people represent an icon figure that is an archetypal representation of certain concepts and ideas, ideologies. So when people look at them, they get a certain sensation. This is why over the years I've banged on about how the Queen is not your mother, because I encounter so many people who say they're royalists in one way or another, and they seem to have this deep psychological association that the Queen is somehow the mother of the nation. That's, to me, that's really creepy. That's creepy as fuck, that people see this strange little old biddy who lives in this weird lifestyle and blah, they see that as being their mother. Oh no!
Obviously, I wish they'd told me about that 30 years ago. I mean, she does have a pair of knockers on her, doesn't she? But
no, mate, no, no. Seek help. Keep taking the tablets. No, it's more, I think, a legacy of people's social interactions where having that kind of iconic figurehead helped the process of the societies, the processes of the society to run. In other words, general day-to-day bureaucracy. Having a figurehead, even if they didn't themselves actually say anything, like today I want all the bureaucrats to write about this particular even if they didn't say anything, they act as a representative of the metaphysical, the non-physical, the paper world concepts that form the structure of the whole system of society, the judiciary, education, whatever. Yeah? But I would argue that if you have an educated populace, you don't need a figurehead. A figurehead is a childish thing to do. It's an infantile thinking process to need to have a figurehead there to remind you why certain ideas and principles are good or bad. If you need the figurehead to constantly tell you that, that means you're still a child who doesn't realize these things for yourself, doesn't have the knowledge in your own heart such that you have to constantly refer to an external figure to keep reminding you. Yeah, that's why I refer to it often as the pseudo parent, because it's like you'd be going, you're doing your thing and you think, oh, I fancy doing this, but will mommy and daddy think it's okay? Do they say I'm allowed to do it? Is it okay for me to do this, mommy and daddy? Yeah, it's that kind of relationship that's going on because you have a personalized, humanized representative of that. Whereas really the concepts, once they're written down on paper, they don't need a personal representation. They stand up for themselves to anyone who's able to read them and comprehend them, which requires a certain amount of education, language, grammar, rhetoric, reasoning. And then you can show these principles to anyone and they'll read it and they'll go, yeah, that makes sense. I agree to that. You don't need a queen to represent the concept of that structure. The structure exists even if the queen disappeared. You could remove the entire royal family now and the structure would still remain. There'd still be the crown over the seat at the back of the court in all the courthouses. The system of justice, the judiciary system, would still be able to operate because a judge doesn't go, hang on a minute, before I pass judgment, I'll go and ask the monarch what judgment I should make. They don't do that.
And in the media, she's
iconography and nothing else. Sorry.
In the media, she's portrayed as a part of the firmament. While the Queen is still there, everything is okay. Yeah, everything is still the same. We're still Britain.
Feel good factor. Feel safe and secure. Look, here's a picture of your monarch to help you feel safe and secure. Here's your picture of your mommy or daddy to make you feel safe and secure.
Yeah, it is a deep one with many, many different strands making up why people accept it. Yeah?
Well, I think it's just years and years of, like we said, propaganda and that sort of educated from, when you're children going to school and the fairy princess programming and stories and books, kings and queen, all that stuff. So it's planted in you as a child. And then as you grow older and whatever, it's some it will grab forever, some it won't. Some will see through the bullshit, and start to question. And and that's what you're seeing now, like two halves, aren't you? Like some is, like you say, still completely under the spell, aren't they? It's a spell. That's all it is. You got to break that spell.
Yeah. It is just a spell of ignorance. Ignorance is a choice, and usually ignorance serves the purpose or serves the requirement of convenience or comfort, from both combined, convenience and comfort. So most people prefer ignorance because then they can just carry on as they are, feeling comfortable the way they do. So they choose to ignore those uncomfortable facts because they would require effort to reassess and bring into their reality. Like, just to make this point, like what we were talking about earlier with the Dogon people. Most people would rather be ignorant of that It's not that they've never heard of it. It's just that they choose to ignore it because it makes them uncomfortable, because it means they'd have to reassess their whole concept of what's
Exactly.
going on here on the planet.
I think a lot of that effort and that discomfort comes from the fact that people don't have the ideas and the language readily in place. Oh, I don't like the Queen because she's an exploitative blah, 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 blah. They don't have those arguments to use against themselves. Yeah, why should I start hating the Queen? Well, because they're lacking those next words. Yeah, they don't have them. They haven't seen them written anywhere. You know, so yeah, I mean, so not all of the ignorance is chosen. A lot of them do opt for.
So some of it is nescience, but I think you'll find the majority of it is ignorance, because people have plenty of opportunity to follow this up for themselves, even if they're not given it on a platter. You know, if they're not spoon-fed it by the current education system, which is the main reason why most people are nescient to this stuff, is because they're never given those kind of tools of, well, what word equals the opposite to that? So they bang on about misogyny, but how many people out there have heard the word misandry, which is the opposite of misogyny? Yeah, misogyny means male domination. Misandry means female domination. But how many people are educated to that? Hardly any.
Another thing with Queen is, you know, they make the argument that she has no real power these days, and they're very careful about keeping that as a myth. So you notice the thing with the Brexit. Will the Queen come out and, you know, tell Boris Johnson to get his act together? No, she didn't. She didn't say nothing. She just reads a script, the one that's given to her by the Prime Minister.
Yeah.
She does have power, but it's very important that people don't actually see her exercising it. Yeah, because that's her biggest excuse. But don't get rid of me, because I don't interfere with anything. They just give me money, and I generate lots of tourism. So that's her excuse kind of thing, yeah? So, yeah, there are a lot of strands to it.
It's good if you like expand that conscious awareness, though, isn't it? That's a good thing. That's how we expand. That's how we grow, isn't it? Over the times we've been here, I suppose, learning in that way. And if there's a group of people, a small group of people hiding that, don't want you to know, to expand your awareness and expand what you know about the planet and yourself, then they're not a great group of people. They're obviously manipulating everything on the planet, are they not? You know, that's what's happening. You know, the revealing of certain things about us and why we're here and all the rest of it. That's just send down the, you know, the cookie hole. You know, go over there. That's where you talk. You know, but they don't want that sort of type of thinking in a mass sense. You know, they want you to be thinking just what's written down, and the education system's right for that, as you say. Defeat your enemy, bring up his children. You know, get to the kids and fill their heads full of this shite, and then they can't think straight when they get older. And plus, now throw in the gender thing and all the rest of it, and get them really messed up for the future. You know?
Just one question for Cookie. You was talking to Jeff the other night about all those horror films. This was one of the questions that occurred to me when I was watching it. Did you mention the fact that say something like The Children of the Damned? Do you remember that film?
Yeah.
That came out of the subconscious understanding that people. There was a story that was coming out in Nazi Germany that when the Nazis got control, they were indoctrinating the children direct. And that Children of the Damned kind of comes out of that, doesn't it? Yeah? And we're seeing the same thing today. Children indoctrinated, yeah, behind people's backs. Yeah, but in this case, it's the education system that's now sort of, yeah.
Extinction Rebellion is a brilliant example of that, when that is being taught in the schools, even to the extent that the schools take a day off so that the children can all go and join in with the protests. And at the same time, in the cultural media, the same political propaganda messages are being woven into the storylines of the cultural media, including horror movies.
Yeah. So it's a good thing to point out that connection between sort of it wasn't just the Nazis. The Russians did that as well.
The Chinese.
You know, why were they so strong? Well, because they indoctrinated the children right from the start. Just like in the Children of the Damned and Extinction Rebellion. Yeah.
Guys, I'm going to have to go in a bit, so just let you know I might have to drop out if you're going to carry on.
I am going to close it up in a
Okay.
Every tyrannical government does the same thing, because it just makes sense from their point of view. If you're taking control of this tribal grouping, then of course you want to have control over the education of the youngest generation so that you can guarantee they stay within your group. You know, they don't defect or become traitors or whatever else. So yeah, of course, every tyrannical government does it. And it's an indicator of tyranny when whatever political system you live under, when they start getting overly involved in every level of your child's upbringing, then that's an indicator that you're living under a tyranny. Because if a government was confident and secure in their capabilities and their I was trying to think of the word, not so much popularity, but the agreement that they have from the public, that the public is happy with what they're doing and they want them to stay in power and do what they do, then they wouldn't need to control heavily or so much the education system, because they would have confidence that the children would grow up to appreciate them just like the parents do. To me, it's the equivalent of a religious faith. If you say you have a faith in something, then it should not weaken your faith if somebody else questions you about why you have that faith. To me, the classic kind of thing is like people who get upset when you criticize elements of their religion. It's like, well, how strong is your faith then? If your faith was strong, these criticisms wouldn't offend you or frighten you so much. Fear is a revealing that you yourself are uncertain about what you claim. Yeah, so if you've genuinely got faith in this stuff, you should have no problem with either just accepting the criticism or being able to address the criticism. Yeah. You see it a lot in certainly in recent times, because of the way they use religions, just like every other aspect, they use religions as a way of getting people against each other. Yeah? So if you question some element of somebody's religion, they automatically jump to the conclusion that you're trying to get them. You know, you're somehow trying to destroy them and kill their faith and whatever else. So, no, man. If anything, I'd rather your faith is stronger, and the fact that your faith is weak is revealed by the fact, you know, you reacting in this fashion. Yeah. But anyway, it's another topic we can talk about another time. I'm going to leave it at that. Pete's already had to jump out. He's got, he's got his slave work to do, so he needs to get his sleep in. And I will say thank you to everyone who joined in the chat, and thanks for everybody tuning in. What's that? You have 15 ovens, and it takes 1 hour to cook one. How long does it take to cook 6 million?
No, don't do that.
Yeah, okay, I get it. Yeah, thanks for joining in the chat, folks. Hello, Super Lead. Sorry you tuned in just for us buggering off again. We'll catch you again soon. Be back on Reality Chat channel on Wednesday night, and Steve Tagu should be on Thursday night. Yeah, and yeah, I'll leave it at that. Okay, thanks for joining in, Peter and Gary, and I'm gonna click the button when I can find the right screen. So I'm looking at the right screen. Right, thanks again, folks. Take care. Cut cheese, and Epstein didn't kill himself.